Like, I feel like I'm completely stuck in the middle. Let's be real. I am in this place where, not saying this to be a jerk.
Hi friends, it's me, Mirab from Starspill USA, and today I am going to take you on a journey that begins high in the serene, pine-scented mountains of Utah, where the air is thin and clear, where valleys open like giant green bowls beneath, snow-tipped peaks, where the horizon stretches further than the eye can follow and the sunsets bathe the world in amber and rose. A place that, for those who live there, is not just a landscape but a state of mind. A region where independence and self-reliance are woven into the culture. And where the stories people tell around kitchen tables are as much about faith as they are about survival. And it is in this world, in the year 1969, that a boy named Kody Brown first opened his eyes to the light of the American West. A land of contradictions, harsh winters, yet generous summers. Isolation, yet close-knit communities. A proud heritage mixed with the quiet knowledge that to live here is to be different from the rest of the United States. And from the beginning, Kody was, in his own way, different. For though he grew up doing all the things a typical boy of the era might do, riding bikes along dusty roads, exploring canyons with a stick in hand as a sword, feeling the thrill of climbing high rocks just to see how far he could push himself, drinking in the scent of pine and sagebrush, watching cattle graze lazily in meadows, his mind and heart were being shaped by something less visible but more powerful than geography, namely the currents of belief and tradition that swirled in his family's home. Currents that were anchored in religion, a religion that, though not openly practicing plural marriage at the time, carried with it the quiet echo of stories about families who had done so in the past, families who had lived in a way that the rest of mainstream America considered unorthodox, even scandalous, but which, in certain circles in Utah, were regarded not with shock but with a kind of matter-of-fact acceptance. And to young Kody, these were not tales of rebellion or transgression. Fleet. They were tales of inspiration, windows into a way of life that seemed to him less about breaking rules and more about following a higher calling. A belief that love and commitment could expand rather than shrink, could be multiplied rather than divided. And as the years passed and he entered his teenage years, Kody began to form the conviction that family was not a fragile little unit to be hidden behind picket fences and suburban curtains, but a robust, living community that could endure anything so long as its members were bound together by mutual devotion, sacrifice, and the unshakable belief that they were part of something greater than themselves. Yet outside the safe, insular world of his community, the reality was stark in most of the United States. Polygamy was not merely rare, it was illegal, taboo, a subject that, when it appeared at all in films or newspapers, was almost always treated as something dangerous or shameful. But Kody, even then, had the sort of temperament that thrived on going against the grain, the kind of stubbornness that, when faced with a wall, looked for a way over it, through it or around it, and by the time he reached his early 20s, he had embraced plural marriage not as some private indulgence but as a religious duty, a divine calling, an arrangement that, in his eyes, is not about acquiring multiple partners for pleasure, but about constructing a fortress of love and resilience, a home in which multiple mothers would nurture multiple children, where responsibilities would be shared, and where the burdens of life would be lightened, because no one person bore them alone. And though on paper this vision shimmered with idealism, in reality it demanded immense patience, emotional intelligence, and the ability to navigate challenges most people would never encounter in a lifetime. And the first great step toward realizing it came when he met a young woman named Mary Barber, whose eyes carried the brightness of someone with both energy and conviction, and whose upbringing mirrored his own in faith and values. And the connection between them was immediate. It's a kind of rapport that makes you feel as if you've known someone far longer than you have. And in 1990, they were married, an event that, while joyous in itself, also marked the laying of the first brick in the edifice of Kody's dream. For Mary was not just his wife in the conventional sense. She was his partner in vision, someone who understood and supported the idea of plural marriage and who encouraged him to keep moving toward it. And in those early days, as they talked about the future, their conversations were full of possibility. Additional wives, many children. A home full of shared responsibilities and love. But even then, Kody understood that such a life would not be free of complexity. That alongside the laughter and companionship would come moments of tension, disagreements, and the need to constantly guard against jealousy. Yet his conviction was such that these challenges did not deter him. And soon, the second wife, Janelle, entered the family. A woman whose personality contrasted with Mary's in grounding ways. She was practical, self-sufficient, goal-oriented, someone who brought a steady, pragmatic energy into the household, and her arrival transformed the dream into a tangible reality. For now, there were two wives, two sets of perspectives, and the need to balance not just love, but time, attention, and emotional space. And then came Christine, the third wife. Warm-heartedness and effervescence infused the family with optimism. Her devotion to the faith reinforcing the sense that this was not simply a lifestyle choice, but a shared spiritual path. And with three wives, Kody's vision felt closer than ever to completion. And the children who began to arrive filled their days with joy, noise, and the messy, unfiltered life that only a large family can know. And Kody relished fatherhood, often boasting about the happiness it brought him. Yet even as the public face of the family was one of unity and harmony, small cracks were forming, differences in parenting style, moments of hurt, flashes of jealousy, but for the most part these remained private, the family known within their local community but largely invisible beyond it. Until in 2010, a proposition arrived that would change everything. When TLC approached them with the idea of a reality series called Sister Wives, a program that would follow their daily lives and introduce the concept of contemporary polygamy to a mass audience, and for Kody, this was more than a chance at fame. It was the opportunity he had long dreamed of. The chance to show the world that plural marriage could work, that it could be full of love, stability, and mutual respect. But the decision to accept was not simple, for it meant exposing their most personal moments to millions, inviting both admiration and judgment. Yet ultimately, Kody agreed, and in September 2010, the first episode aired, bringing into the homes of viewers not only Kody and his three wives, Mary, Janelle, and Christine, but also a new figure, Robyn, who would become his fourth wife. And the reaction from the public was immediate and intense, with some praising the Browns for their openness and courage, while others condemned their choices, and social media buzzed with debate. And at first, Kody thrived in the spotlight, the early episodes painting a picture of family outings, shared meals, and genuine laughter. But the cameras, which he had imagined as allies in telling his story, also became relentless mirrors, capturing not only the joys but the strains. And nowhere was this more apparent than in the shifts that followed Robyn's arrival. For she was younger, more glamorous, brought an energy that both invigorated and unsettled the household. And Kody's evident affection for her stirred feelings of insecurity among the other wives, Mary. Once the cornerstone of the family began to feel pushed aside, Janelle grew wary of the new dynamic. Christine felt neglected, and these emotions, which might have been dealt with quietly in private, are now part of the show's narrative, visible to millions. And as the seasons unfolded, audiences watched Christine confess her jealousy, Mary grappled with infertility and her changing role, and Janelle questioned her emotional intimacy with Kody. And meanwhile, Kody, with his confidence and quick charm, navigated the public aspects of his role with apparent ease. But the private balancing act became harder for managing for marriages. It is a challenge in the shadows and under the harsh, unblinking eye of reality television. It can be almost impossible. And one of the most dramatic shifts came when the family decided to leave Utah for Las Vegas, a move framed on the show as necessary to avoid potential legal trouble. but which also meant leaving behind their support network and the familiarity of the life they had built. A decision that tested the resilience of every relationship in the family. And thus began a new chapter, not only in their personal lives, but in their televised story, one in which the original dream, the dream of a harmonious, loving plural marriage that could inspire others, was now being lived out on a stage where every smile, every argument, every moment of vulnerability was open to public consumption, and as fame brought both opportunity and pressure, the Browns found themselves navigating a storm that would push each bond to its limits. A storm that began the moment Kody Brown's private vision became, in the truest sense, public property, a story no longer told only within the walls of Dick Stain. Of course, of his home, but played out before an audience that was by turns supportive, critical, fascinated, and unrelenting.
With as many people as you can, and we can't. And it's not fun. It's weird not to get together.
In Las Vegas, the Browns found themselves at the beginning of a new chapter that shimmered with promise on the surface, yet carried within it the seeds of quiet discontent. A chapter that demanded they leave behind the tightly knit physical unity of one shared home for a more fragmented existence of 4 separate houses, each standing as both a fortress of privacy and a wall of separation. For the wives, this was a bittersweet reality, offering a certain measure of security and a shield of anonymity from local law enforcement scrutiny, but simultaneously stripping away the daily intimacy of shared corridors and communal kitchens. And though the dream they had long spoken of, a sprawling communal residence in which every wife and child could remain constantly connected, was never realized, the family told themselves that their new arrangement was a step forward, a temporary measure until circumstances aligned. Yet with every passing month, the space between those 4 front doors seemed to widen into something more than mere distance. While on the polished set pieces of their television appearances, the Browns continued to beam under the studio lights, sharing picnics and holiday dinners and moments of on-camera laughter that radiated warmth to the millions watching from their living rooms. Moments that, though genuine in the instant, often masked the tension simmering beneath. Each wife was quietly carving out her own identity, marking her own territory. A subtle shift from the earlier days when the group operated with a sense of shared ownership over their collective life. And Kody, the patriarch, increasingly found himself seen in the company of Robin, the newest addition to the family, in ways that did not go unnoticed by the others. For the once united front was beginning to take on the shape of 4 parallel lives moving in loosely coordinated directions. By this time, Sister Wives had become a ratings success for TLC, drawing viewers not merely for the novelty of plural marriage, but for the deeply personal stories of each woman. And as audiences formed favorites, took sides, and argued online about fairness and loyalty, Kody's own narrative remained polished in interviews, a man claiming to love all his wives equally, committed to the principles of unity and teamwork, though the raw edges showed in private moments captured by the cameras, where he spoke of the emotional strain, the exhausting compromises, and the challenge of keeping everyone content. Even as he insisted these were but teething troubles on the road to a stronger, more loving family. Yet the wives were beginning to feel otherwise, and by the middle of the first season, the more perceptive viewers sensed a change in atmosphere. Noticing how Mary, the first wife and longtime partner, appeared increasingly isolated, her candid admissions of loneliness standing in quiet contrast to the bustling family scenes. While Janelle, ever pragmatic, seemed more and more absorbed in her work and personal ambitions, missing family events and distancing herself from the emotional undercurrents. And Christine, once the effervescent cheerleader of the group, started voicing her unhappiness and longing for more attention from her husband, while Robin, still the newcomer yet already Kody's closest confidant, deepened their undeniable chemistry, much to the quiet resentment of the others. In hindsight, those early Las Vegas seasons were riddled with red flags. Moments of genuine joy and togetherness juxtaposed against tearful confessionals. Simmering tensions and subtle acts of exclusion, revealing a man clinging desperately to an ideal while for women wrestled with the evolving meaning of that dream. And although it was still possible to imagine the Browns weathering the storms, the roots of eventual collapse were already burrowing deep. For Mary, the changes were especially acute, for she had been at Kody's side from the very beginning, helping to lay the foundation of their plural marriage. And now the intimacy they once shared had faded into something more distant, with her widely discussed struggles with infertility only compounding her sense of isolation. While Janelle, the business-minded second wife, leaned into her independence, consciously choosing not to compete for Kody's attention, a decision that, while empowering, further widened the emotional gap. Christine, ever open-hearted, found herself speaking with increasing frankness about her feelings of jealousy and her hunger for romance. While Robyn's arrival, though initially welcomed, had destabilized the delicate equilibrium in ways that could not be undone. She was not merely another wife, but became Auntie Kody's only legal spouse after he divorced Mary in order to marry her, ostensibly so he could adopt Robyn's children from a previous marriage. A decision explained as practical, yet rich in symbolism that was not lost on the other wives, nor on the fans who followed every twist and turn with forensic interest, debating fiercely about favoritism and the erosion of equality. Life in Las Vegas only magnified these divides, with the 4 separate homes fostering both independence and isolation, reducing the spontaneous mingling of children between households and relegating togetherness to orchestrated holiday gatherings and special events. And though Kody's visits were meant to follow a fair rotation, it was quietly observed that his time at Robyn's felt more frequent, more relaxed, and more engaged, in contrast to the brisk and sometimes perfunctory interactions at other homes, an imbalance that, while rarely confronted directly, became a silent refrain in confessionals. These interviews became the stage where the wives could speak without interruption, and Christine, her eyes often glistening, confessed to feeling as though she occupied the bottom rung of Kody's affections, while Mary dropped the bombshell admission that her relationship with him was no longer romantic, a revelation that stunned viewers and ignited a storm of commentary online. And Janelle, with her steady composure, confirmed she valued her autonomy over any attempt to reclaim Kody's focus, while Robyn tearfully denied any desire to be the favorite. Though her visible closeness with Kody told a different story. The fans didn't merely watch passively, they participated, taking to social media to dissect every glance, every touch, every omission. Some defending Kody as a man doing his best in an inherently complicated arrangement, others accusing him of neglecting his older wives and bending the family dynamic to favor Robyn. And the wives, at times reading these public judgments, found themselves even more burdened by the pressure of perception. For Christine, this period was the most painful transformation of all. She had entered plural marriage with a conviction that it would bring abundance in love and connection. But as the years passed, she found herself largely raising children, while her husband's attention seemed reserved for the cameras or for Robyn. And season by season, her disappointment became more visible, her voice more resolute in expressing that her vision and Kody's were no longer aligned, prompting fans to rally around her, encouraging her to seek her own happiness. And so, even in what the world considered the Browns' golden age, the years when they still filled their homes with laughter for the audience and posed for smiling family portraits, the glow had begun to dull, replaced in quiet moments by whispers of envy, seconds of cold silence, sidelong glances, and an unspoken acknowledgement that the center could not hold forever.
He had decided he was already out of the relationship, and since he never loved me anyway, I think any communication at all would be considered a nag.
The gradual deterioration of Christine's relationship with Kody Brown became one of the clearest and most undeniable signs that the cracks in the Brown family's foundation were not mere surface scratches that could be smoothed over with a smile or a carefully staged family gathering, but profound, widening fissures that had been forming quietly over decades and were now beginning to tear through the very heart of the life they had so publicly built. By the time this particular chapter of their story was playing out before millions of viewers, it had become painfully obvious that the Browns were on a collision course from which there would be no return, with Mary and Kody's marriage hanging by the thinnest of threads. Janelle living what was in all but name a separate and largely independent existence. Christine herself visibly worn down by years of disappointment. And Robin, whether she wanted the role or not, acting as the gravitational center of Kody's affections, a position that brought her no shortage of scrutiny. For those watching from the outside, it was television that was as addictive as it was heartbreaking. Yet, for the Browns themselves, it was the slow-motion destruction of a dream that had been painstakingly woven together over decades. A dream that had once been held up as a unique example of unity in plural marriage, now unraveling before the world's eyes. As the emotional fissures grew deeper and the tension became impossible to disguise, the family stood on the verge of challenges that would transform those cracks into gaping chasms, because every storm begins with a single, gathering cloud. And for the Browns, that cloud had been forming for decades, heavy with resentment, unmet needs, and unspoken truths. When it finally broke, it was no gentle rain to be weathered in comfort, but a hurricane that would rip apart everything Kody Brown believed he had established. A tempest that no amount of bravado or controlling leadership could withstand, marking the point at which the family could no longer pretend that all was well, forcing them into moments of raw honesty that would be replayed and analyzed by viewers across the globe. Christine had, in truth, been quietly miserable for years, smiling through the ache, clinging to the ideal of plural marriage she had cherished since her youth. Yet realizing with each passing season that the dream she had signed up for was not the life she was living. She longed for mutual love, partnership, and shared decision-making, but found herself married to a man who had, in her eyes, ceased to be her partner in any meaningful sense and become instead a distant, almost ghostly presence, one who appeared when it suited him but was otherwise emotionally absent. The gap between them had not merely widened, it had deepened into an unbridgeable canyon. And the final blow came during a conversation in which Kody admitted he no longer wished for an intimate marriage with her. A revelation that did not simply wound her pride but crushed the last fragile threads of hope she had been holding on to. For Christine, it was not the absence of physical closeness that cut deepest, but the clear sign that he had given up on their bond entirely. And after months of private reflection, she came to the conclusion that she could no longer stay. Leaving a plural marriage, however, was far from a simple act of walking out the door. It meant untangling herself from an entire, tightly interwoven family system, from her relationships with the other wives to the care and custody of her children, all while facing the judgment of a community where separation is rarely met with kindness. Yet she had reached her limit, transforming from the family's most vocal supporter into a woman methodically packing boxes, preparing to start afresh, beyond Kody's shadow. When she told him the exchange was tense and unyielding, he accused her of selfishness, of dismantling the family for her own ends. But Christine stood her ground, telling him plainly that she could not remain in a marriage where she did not feel loved or wanted. It's a moment of unvarnished truth that would reverberate not just through their own lives, but through the entire Brown family dynamic. Her decision sent shockwaves rippling through the family. Some of the children, especially the younger ones, were confused or hurt, while others quietly accepted her choice. The sister wives each reacted differently, with Mary already estranged from Kody quietly empathizing with Christine's pain, though offering no public support. Janelle openly affirming Christine's right to pursue happiness, even if it meant leaving. And Robin taking it as a deep personal betrayal, seeing it as a blow to the unity she so desperately wanted to preserve. For viewers, these were some of the most intense and emotionally charged scenes the series had ever shown. The tearful confrontations, hushed confessions, and raw conversations playing out on national television, giving fans an intimate front row seat to a family's disintegration. Kody, once the unquestioned hub of the family's wheel, was dealt a very public blow to his authority, and on camera he let his frustration, anger, and disbelief spill out, painting Christine as someone who had abandoned a sacred bond, yet that more he spoke, the more viewers began to question whether the real problem lay not with Christine's departure but with his own failure to nurture healthy relationships with all his wives, equally his evident closeness to Robyn only fanning the flames of speculation about favoritism. In the age of social media, each new episode of Sister Wives became a battlefield for public opinion. Hashtags like #Team Christine trending as fans praised her for choosing self-respect over endurance, while Kody faced a barrage of criticism, accused of sidelining his other wives and neglecting the equality he once claimed to value. Christine's departure also laid bare the practical complexities of leaving a plural marriage, with no formal legal structure for spiritual unions, forcing her to decide where to live, how to divide parenting responsibilities, and how to maintain her children's relationships with their siblings. She chose Utah, seeking closeness to her older children, and quickly began to thrive. Her social media posts widely shared and discussed on platforms including the pop culture commentary CHANNEL Starspill USA, showing a woman lighter, freer, even hinting at the possibility of dating again, in stark contrast to the weary figure viewers had last seen in Kody's home. Her move sent an unspoken challenge to the remaining wives, prompting Meri to publicly acknowledge that her own marriage had long been more platonic friendship than romantic partnership. While Janelle, always fiercely independent, began confronting Kody more openly over issues like stalled building plans on Coyote Pass and what she saw as poor financial leadership. Janelle's loyalty to Christine remained firm, and her willingness to defend her on camera deepened her own rift with Kody, eventually leading her to quietly leave the marriage without the dramatic flair audiences had come to expect from family departures. Meri's exit, though long foreshadowed, felt like a slow fade to black, a bittersweet end for the first wife who had helped lay the family's foundations, only to watch herself be pushed to the margins. In the end, Robyn was the only wife remaining, a position that on paper might have seemed like a victory, but in reality left her presiding over a fractured, embittered family and carrying much of the public blame for its downfall. Her televised tears doing little to sway an audience convinced her closeness with Kody had widened the gulf between him and the others. For Kody, once the patriarch of 4 wives and 18 children, the transition to a quiet life with only Robyn and her children was stark. The bustling homes he had once rotated through replaced by long stretches of solitude, his televised anger, and occasional private admissions of feeling betrayed painting the portrait of a man unable or unwilling to adapt. The breakdown affected not only the adults but the children, some openly siding with their mothers, others trying to remain neutral. Their once close sibling bonds strained by distance and divided loyalties. Sister Wives, which had begun as a window into an unconventional but seemingly loving family, had become a case study in the rise and fall of a celebrity plural marriage, with Kody's shifting in public perception from a charismatic leader to the architect of his own undoing, and Christine, Janelle, and Meri applauded for reclaiming their independence. Through it all, TLC's cameras kept rolling, ratings climbing as audiences tuned in for each new revelation. The show's tone transformed from one of idealism to one of survival emotional, financial, and relational, and when the history of reality television is written, Kody Brown's name will remain as both a cautionary tale and a testament to the universal truth that relationships, no matter how unconventional, stand or fall on the same pillars of communication, respect, and balance. The dream that began in the quiet mountains of Utah had ended in scattered households and estranged marriages. Yet the impact of its collapse and the conversations it sparked about autonomy, self-worth, and change would linger long after the final credits rolled. With Christine's choice standing as both the symbolic and literal breaking point from which the Browns would never return.